Good Tuesday morning, everyone, and welcome into today's daily Bible reading for August the 15th. Today we are reading together in 2 Samuel chapter 11 and also 2 Samuel chapter 12, which is going to be the story of David and Bathsheba and the horrible circumstances surrounding these two individuals, death of Uriah, death of a little baby, and just absolute disgrace upon the name of Yahweh, and a slap in the face from David toward him for everything that he had done for David up until this point. This is certainly this story, along with the period of time of Absalom and that whole debacle as well. I think those two would probably be the two lowest parts of David's story here within the book of 2 Samuel. We'll look at that today here in 11 and 12, David and Bathsheba. And then just a couple of chapters down the road, actually not even that far, it's tomorrow, where we see more trouble coming in the family of David. And really, a lot of that probably stems from the curses that God places upon David's family because of this great sin with Bathsheba that we're going to read about here in a moment in chapter 12. So let me go and get the text up on the screen for us, and we will read along together here in 2 Samuel chapters 11 and 12. Second Samuel chapter 11 and 2 Samuel chapter 12. Remember, previously we see the Israelites at war with the Ammonites and also the Arameans, who have been hired as mercenaries for the Ammonite king. That does not go very well for the Ammonites. They end up retreating into Rabbah. Joab does not go after them, but is later, we're going to see here in this chapter, it seems that he's going to go back and finish that deal with Rabbah. But David, who had previously been a part of the battle, doesn't do that this time. So this story takes place seemingly in the context of this battle with the Ammonites. So reading here in 2 Samuel chapter 11 and verse number 1, in the spring when the kings march out to war, David sent Joab with his officers and all Israel. They destroyed the Ammonites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. One evening, David got up from his bed and strolled around on the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing, a very beautiful woman. So David sent someone to inquire about her, and he said, "Isn't this Bathsheba, daughter of Eliam and wife of Uriah the Hittite?" David sent messengers to get her, and when she came to him, he slept with her. Now she had been purifying herself from her uncleanness. Afterwards, she returned home, and the woman conceived and sent word to inform David, "I am pregnant." David sent orders to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." So Joab sent Uriah to David. When Uriah came to him, David asked Joab and the troops, David asked how Joab and the troops were doing and how the war was going. Then he said to Uriah, "Go down to your house and wash your feet." So Uriah left the palace, and a gift from the king followed him. But Uriah slept at the door of the palace with all his master's servants. He did not go down to his house. When it was reported to David, Uriah didn't go home. David questioned Uriah, "Haven't you just come from a journey? Why didn't you go home?" Uriah answered David, "The ark, Israel, and Judah are dwelling in tents, and my master Joab and his soldiers are camping in the open field. How can I enter my house to eat and drink and sleep with my wife? As surely as you live and by your life, I will not do this." "We'll stay here today also," David said to Uriah, "and tomorrow I will send you back." So Uriah stayed in Jerusalem that day and the next. Then David invited Uriah to eat and drink with him, and David got him drunk. He went out in the evening to lie down on his cots with his master's servants, but he did not go home. The next morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and sent it with Uriah. In the letter he wrote, "Put Uriah at the front of the fiercest fighting, then withdraw from him so that he is struck down and dies." When Joab was besieging the city, he put Uriah in the place where he knew the best enemy soldiers were. Then the men of the city came out and attacked Joab, and some of the men from David's soldiers fell in battle. Uriah the Hittite also died. Joab sent someone to report to David all the details of the battle. He commanded the messenger, when you've finished telling the king all the details of the battle, if the king's anger gets stirred up and he asks you, why did you get so close to fight, or to the city to fight? Didn't you realize they would shoot from the top of the wall at the Bez who struck Abimelech, son of Jerubbesheth? Didn't a woman drop an upper millstone on him from the top of the wall so that he died? Why did you get so close to the wall? Then say, your servant Uriah the Hittite is dead also. Then the messenger left. When he arrived, he reported to David all that Joab had sent him to tell. The messenger reported to David, the men gained the advantage over us and came out against us in the field, but we counterattacked right up to the entrance of the city gate. However, the archers shot down on your servants from the top of the wall, and some of the king's servants died. Your servant Uriah the Hittite is also dead. David told the messengers, say this to Joab, don't let this matter upset you, because the sword devours all alike. Intensify your fight against the city and demolish it. Encourage him. When Uriah's wife heard that her husband Uriah had died, she mourned for him. When the time of mourning ended, David had her brought to his house. She became his wife and bore him a son. However, Yahweh considered what David had done to be evil. So Yahweh sent Nathan to David. This is 2 Samuel chapter 12. When he arrived, he said to him, there were two men in a certain city, one rich and the other poor. The rich man had very large flocks and herds, but the poor man had nothing except one small ewe lamb that he had brought. He raised her, and she grew up with him and his children. From his meager food she would eat, from his cup she would drink, and in his arms she would sleep. She was like a daughter to him. Now a traveler came to the rich man, but the rich man could not bring himself to take one of his own sheep or cattle to prepare for the traveler who had come to him. Instead, he took the poor man's lamb and prepared it for his guest. David was infuriated with the man and said to Nathan, as Yahweh lives, the man who did this deserves to die. Because he has done this thing and shown no pity, he must pay 4 lambs for that lamb. Nathan replied to David, you are the man. This is what Yahweh, God of Israel, says. I anointed you king over Israel. I rescued you from Saul. I gave your master's house to you and your master's wives into your arms. And I gave you the house of Israel and Judah. And if that was not enough, I would have given you even more. Why then have you despised Yahweh's command by doing what I consider evil? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife as your own. You murdered him with the Ammonite sword. Now, therefore, the sword will never leave your house you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own wife. This is what Yahweh says. I'm going to bring disaster on you from your own family. I will take your wives and give them to another before your very eyes, and he will sleep with them in broad daylight. You acted in secret, but I will do this before all Israel and in broad daylight. David responded to Nathan, I have sinned against Yahweh. Then Nathan replied to David, and Yahweh has taken away your sin. You will not die. However, because you treated Yahweh with such contempt in this matter, the son born to you will die. Then Nathan went home. Yahweh struck the baby that Uriah's wife had borne to David, and he became deathly ill. David pleaded with God for the boy. He fasted, went home, and spent the night lying on the ground. The elders of his house stood beside him to get him up from the ground, but he was unwilling and would not eat anything with them. On the 7th day, that baby died. So David's servants were afraid to tell him the baby was dead. They said, look, while the baby was alive, we spoke to him, and he wouldn't listen to us. So how can we tell him the baby is dead? He might do something desperate. When David saw that his servants were whispering to each other, he guessed that the baby was dead. So he asked his servants, is the baby dead? Well, he is, they replied. Then David got up from the ground. He washed, anointed himself, changed his clothes, went to Yahweh's house and worshipped. Then he went home and requested something to eat. So they served him food, and he ate. His servants asked him, why have you done this? While the baby was alive, you fasted and wept. But when he died, you got up and ate food. He answered, while the baby was alive, I fasted and wept because I thought, who knows? Yahweh may be gracious to me and let him live. But now that he is dead, why should I fast? Can I bring him back again? I'll go to him, but he will never return to me. Then David comforted his wife Bathsheba. He went to her and slept with her. He gave birth to a son and named him Solomon. Yahweh loved him and sent a message through the prophet Nathan, who named him Jedediah, because of Yahweh. Joab fought against Rabbah of the Ammonites and captured the royal fortress. Then Joab sent messengers to David to say, I have fought against Rabbah and have captured its water supply. Now, therefore, assemble the rest of the troops, lay siege to the city and capture it. Otherwise, I will be the one to capture the city and will be named after me. So David assembled all the troops and went to Rabbah. He fought against it and captured it. He took the crown from the head of their king and was placed on David's head. The crown weighed 75 pounds of gold and had a precious stone in it. In addition, David took away a large quantity of plunder from the city. He removed the people who were in the city and put them to work with saws, iron picks, and iron axes, and to labor at brick making. He did the same to all the Ammonite cities. Then he and all his troops returned to Jerusalem. And that is 2 Samuel chapter 11 and 2 Samuel chapter 12. If you are reading along with us today and you did not happen to be with us for our assembly this past Sunday, then I encourage you to take some time and go to the YouTube channel for our church. Just search Loudon Church of Christ, or you go to our Facebook page, Loudon Church of Christ, and find that there as well. Or you go to our website, loudoncoc.org, loudoncoc.org. You can go there and find the video and the audio recording for that particular lesson there in all three of those places, audio or video, or both if it's on the website. And you can see where I focus in that lesson on the control aspect of this text. Who is in control? We focus on David's control, how he was sending people and doing all these things and thinking that he had everything under control. But at the end of the day, the reality is that God was in control of the situation. He determined what was right and wrong, and he held accountable those who were guilty. Of course, here David is guilty of much. He's guilty of one of the things he might be guilty of. This is one that's disputed among people, depending on how you read the text. But the more I read it, and especially again to the end of chapter 12, he should have been out to war. David should have been out to war. What we've seen previously within the text is that whenever Joab and his brother Abishai went out to war, they did not have decisive victory. Yet once David went out and led the army, they had decisive victory. Here we see in chapter 11, if this is sequential in its chronology, David does not go out to war. And eventually, at the end of chapter 12, Joab calls to him and says, hey, you need to come out here. You need to finish this off. That way you get the credit for this because you're the king. And David ends up doing that. So really, it seems that David should have been out there all along. Again, if I'm reading this text correctly, he should have been out there all along, but he wasn't. And that led to the opportunity for these issues to be present. He was guilty of lust after this woman who was not his. David had a problem with women, it seems. He had 6, 7 wives already. And for that, and because of that, he was in violation of Yahweh's commands concerning his kings, that they were not to multiply wives for themselves. But he did that, and he was not sufficed. There we go. He was not sufficed with the wives that he had, satisfied with them. Instead, he wanted this other woman, Bathsheba. She was beautiful. He was able to see her bathing, and he lusted after her, and he inquired about her. And even after hearing that she was the wife of someone else, he still took her. Now, she had been no one's wife. Then, I mean, again, technically, it would have still been wrong for him to add another wife to his already many wives, but it would have been, I guess, less bad if we're going to have sort of a moral scale here. But the fact was that this was somebody else's wife, and he needed to leave her alone. It was not his. She was not his. He had no right to her, but he went anyway, and that was wrong. That was very wrong on David's part, and he should have known better. Also, want to point out that once the sexual activity between them was completed and she became pregnant, he should have just fessed up. He should have confessed to his infidelity, but he didn't. He tried to cover it up, and the cover up of it all was he ended up having Uriah killed. Notice that Yahweh blames David for Uriah's death. He says this in verse number 9. Why have you despised Yahweh's command by doing what I consider evil? You struck down Uriah the Hittite with the sword and took his wife as your own. You murdered him with the Ammonite sword. So even though David was on the one that struck him down with his own sword, he arranged it. And for that, Yahweh considered him guilty. Now, throughout all this, of course, we're just so disappointed in this man after God's own heart failing in such a spectacular way. I mean, just making absolute poor decision after poor decision, leading to blunder after blunder. And we're left wondering, how does this happen? How does this happen? Well, it happens whenever we lose focus. It happens whenever we forget who really is in control, or who we should allow to be in control. And that should be God. Really, at the end of the day, God is in control in the fact that he is going to hold the evildoer accountable. And he does that for David here in this story. This child is going to die. And I'll also, again, bring to our attention what he says in verse number, verse number 10, excuse me. Therefore, Yahweh, the sword will never leave your house because you despised me and took the wife of Uriah the Hittite to be your own wife. The sword, what does that mean? I think it means just disaster, death, suffering is never going to depart from David's house. And you know what? Once we get into the next chapter, with Amnon raping Tamar, with Absalom going after him, and everything that comes with that moving forward, all these issues within David's family, I think a lot of this is a result of this, but also we might say that it is a result of what we see. Excuse me. It's also what we see back in chapter 3, where we read about all of these children that David was having by all these different wives. Again, I think all of this gets back to David's struggle with women. And really, for all of us guys, we certainly understand the struggle that we have ourselves with women, and practicing self-control and guarding against our eyes and making sure to give every effort to maintain a pure heart. All of these things are very much present. They're very much something we must confront and we must wrestle with to be able to overcome it. And we see the disastrous consequences of that not being the case, that things just fall apart and heartache takes over everything else that we're feeling. Now, of course, at the end of all this, David shows himself to repent. He gives himself fully to Yahweh, and Yahweh comes back and he blesses David and Bathsheba, who is now his wife, with a son, Solomon. Of course, that's a big deal. Solomon's going to be a key figure within Israel's history. But we also find that Nathan actually gave Yahweh another name, gave Solomon another name from Yahweh. And it's the name Jedediah. Solomon being something around the word of peace. That name Solomon sounds like the Hebrew word for peace. But then Jedediah, that means beloved of the Lord, which is going back to the fact that the text says that Yahweh loved him. So which of these is more true? Is it more true that Yahweh loves Solomon, or that there would be peace surrounding Solomon? Probably the fact that Yahweh loved him, which we might come to understand why this different name is given, although from now on he is going to be known as Solomon, not Jedediah. And again, we saw that at the end of the chapter, that good things happen whenever David went back to where he should have been, leading his army, fighting against their enemies. And when he does that, there was a great deal of success again. But for the next little bit, there's not going to be much good happening in David's life. Again, we're going to see many issues within his family, rape, incest. We're going to have murder and revolting and mutiny. Just so many things are going to be showing up in the next few chapters. So if you have not read this text yet, the middle portion of 2 Samuel, or if it's been a while, just buckle in. There's going to be a lot of real immorality showing up, but there will be great lessons for us to learn as well as we read through the text together over the coming days. I hope you will tune in tomorrow as we do read together in chapter 13. And I hope you have a great rest of your Monday. Tuesday. I appreciate you reading along with me to start this day. Have a great Tuesday. God bless you. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you tomorrow reading together from 2 Samuel chapter 13. Have a great day.